with some young adults. We're going to have a very good discussion about something that happened here a few months ago. In the United States, we have an election to elect our president every 4 years. And just a few months ago, we re-elected President Obama to be our president. But before we start talking about politics, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Let's start with you.
Yes, my name is Tandi Mushipe. I'm from Durham, North Carolina originally, and I'm a student here at UNC Charlotte.
I'm David Aviles. I'm originally from California, but I moved to Charlotte 13 years ago.
My name's Parth Mehta. I'm a master's student at UNC Charlotte in public administration and intern with Mecklenburg County.
I'm Christine Edwards. I'm also a master's student at UNC Charlotte, and I intern with the City of Charlotte.
Well, thank you all for joining me today. Before we start talking about the president being elected, let's talk about the months before he got to that place. Did any of you all watch the debates that went on between President Obama and Mitt Romney?
Yes.
What did you think?
What is there not to think?
I thought that they were very good debates, but at the same time, they were a really good indication of how divided our political system has become. During the debates, you could really just see the difference in opinions of Republicans and Democrats. It really highlighted that. But overall, I think Obama came out on top at the end of it.
I don't know, that first debate, he wasn't really present. So I wonder if that was a strategy when he did that in the first debate. What do you think?
I jokingly said that to my uncle, but no one, with the repercussions that I think that had from what the polling showed, if that was a strategy, then that was probably not the right strategy. I don't think that was a strategy at all. I think there was just probably a lack of effort from the beginning, or just a lack of preparation of what was to come.
Yeah, I think the stakes were too high for him to be to that strategy, for him to risk going down on the polls, going down national level. I mean, usually I think the first one is actually the one that people watch the most, and I think it would hurt him, or it actually, in fact, did hurt him because he did so poorly.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought the debates were good, and that first one was interesting. Like just watching, the president for 4 years he's been in the spotlight. It just didn't seem like his character to not be like on top of his game like that. But maybe it was a strategy. But the thing about the debates, though, it seemed all of those debates, they seemed very scripted. Like it seemed like you couldn't really get the authentic. They tried to be authentic, but at the same time, they're all prepared answers. So you really don't get the meat of the policies on there. So I ended up really didn't get much from those debates, to be honest with you.
I hadn't thought about it that way. One thing about the debates that I was sort of on the fence on, I felt sorry for Mitt Romney because he doesn't know very much about foreign policy. So that third debate, he really had to study. Do you think that we should have debates that talk about foreign policy for those that haven't had a chance to work in that arena?
That's a good question, especially considering the issues we have within the United States right now. I think, there is a saying out there, right? Worry about yourself before you worry about others. And so if you were to extend that out to the debates and to our political system, one would worry about our country before you worry about others. But the other side of that is that we have, as the United States, sort of evolved into somewhat of a superpower. I mean, a lot of people would contend that, but to a certain extent, we still have this level that we have to hold, and that is that we have to know how to take care of some other countries or some other parts of the world, even if we're having some issues going on internally.
I'd have to agree with that. I do think foreign policy should be kept as part of the presidential debates because you have to gain that trust with the American citizens. And if you can't gain trust with the citizens at home, then it'll be hard to make your case for being a good foreign policy, implementer or being a good president. So I think it's a really good indication of your understanding of foreign policy.
I'm sitting here thinking, I don't remember whenever Obama ran the first time, he didn't really have a lot of experience with foreign policy either. And do you all remember what he said whenever he ran the first time about foreign policy, where he stood?
Well, I don't quite remember the specifics, but what I do remember vividly was even though he didn't have foreign policy experience, he really showed himself to be a global citizen, though. Because he traveled to Germany, and he had this huge rally out in Germany, and people were, very positive, were reacting to him very positively. And he went to Israel, too, if I remember correctly. So he really showed that foreign policy acumen. And I don't remember the specifics of the foreign policy. I mean, he advocated going out of Iraq, which he followed through on. So I really think that he showed himself to have foreign policy credentials, even though he hadn't had any experience yet.
He may not have needed the credentials because of the situation we were in. We were in Afghanistan. We were also in Iraq. So it's not to say that one shouldn't, but I definitely think that because we were in both of those countries, that he already had something to play with in a sense, and that was already a national conversation as is. So you've sort of already adopted something that you're going to be talking about and addressing over the next 4 years.
Now that President Obama is our president again, what do you think he should do about foreign affairs? Period. Just all of them, because we have a lot going on right now.
Right.
Well, I happen to think that he should focus more on domestic policy. I don't know too much about foreign policy, but I know that it takes a lot of our federal budget to maintain two wars, especially when things are not so great at home economically. So I happen to think that he really should focus more on domestic policy, such as student loan reform, tax reform, health care, which he has done. So he should really focus more on that, I think.
I think the second term would actually be focusing on that, domestic issues. Because if you look at the foreign policy, when it comes to the wars, they're ending. The second one, or the first one that we were in from the beginning in Afghanistan, it's already coming to an end as well. So I think the focus will reshift to domestic.
What about our relationship with China? I keep hearing that we owe them so much money.
Right.
Is this true?
But I mean, I feel like it's a very interdependent relationship, though. I mean, we owe China so much, but the thing is, China's economy is based a lot on producing goods that we consume. So even if the U.S. economy goes down, then that's very detrimental to the Chinese economy too. So the Chinese depend upon us as well. I mean, if you listen to a lot of the media, they make you scared of China, like, oh, China owns us, but China's very dependent upon us as well. So
I hadn't thought about it that way.
And that's what the world is moving to as a whole.
Right.
That we shouldn't be necessarily thinking about who's a superpower or who is the caretaker of all these countries. Instead, the focus should be shifting to how can we all work together to address these problems that transcend all international borders. And so when it comes to China, it doesn't matter that they have some of this money that we owe them. It doesn't matter because we both have issues that are similar, especially when you talk about climate change, and those are things that we can come together and talk about. And only then really do you get to a point where foreign policy doesn't necessarily matter, but that it's going in the right direction, that it's becoming much more constructive.
And just to add to part real quick and to your earlier point, which is the issue of foreign policy, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that our military budget is currently bigger than the next 20 countries combined.
Oh, really?
So I feel like that's very unsustainable. And as we go towards becoming more global partners, where it's not just a superpower that's controlling other countries, I feel like we need to focus more on that, remove more money from the military budget and focus more on education, more on building our own home economy, and then just fostering more diplomatic relations with other countries.
We've been talking about China and us owing them all this money. How did we get to this place? Because it seems like I woke up and one day there we are owing China so much money, and I'm like, well, what did we borrow it for? Do you all know? Help me understand.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the media and media attention in the political arena. Whenever you have problems at home, sometimes it's good to shift it away from that and put it on something else. And I think that for a very long time, the government has been handling our debt very well. Maybe we're still in debt, but if the people don't know about it, they're able to focus on their own lives and their own livelihood. So I think it has a lot to do with the media just really emphasizing the debt. I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm just saying it's more in the spotlight now.
And sort of turning that entire China-America relationship on its head, China is borrowing from us because they trust that we are going to eventually repay them.
Ah, okay.
And that's a really important thing to understand, because if they trust us, that means that we as a country, we have a great system. We will stand by whatever we say that we will owe, and we have a really good system compared to so many other countries that means that we are going to do what we say. So we keep on looking at this as a bad relationship or as a bad thing, but really what it means is that if you flip it over, there's actually something good behind it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, if you look at the history of the nation as a whole, we've been doing borrowing for years. I mean, if you look at the administrations and things like that, almost every administration has borrowed money from any China or whatever country you have. But it's when it gets very political, like she mentioned, it's when you turn things around and try to use scare tactics to try to say, this country is giving us so much money and we owe them so much, and so they're going to take us over. And I don't think that's the good approach that the media is using.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about domestic issues. Okay?
Okay.
Where do you all stand, or how do you feel about how he's handling the domestic issues today? There's quite a few of them.
I don't know. When it comes to, it can be a little bit heated when it comes to domestic issues, especially when social issues taking place. Because the country in itself is very divided as to how we should handle a lot of domestic things. I think he's taken the approach needed as a president, kind of lay back a little bit and try to see where the country is headed, and supported where the country in itself is headed. The financial situation, of course, I think he's doing pretty well. He does need to do a little bit more when it comes to dealing with Congress and try to pass reforms to handle the economy. But I think he will do good.
You think he will?
When I think about domestic issues, I really just kind of ignore the social issues, just because I think that's something that, in my personal take, that's hard to really control.
Right.
It's not about favoring one side or the other. It's just why try to work with things that are really difficult to control. It's difficult to kind of go into someone's house and tell them what to do, let alone your own kids,
Right.
your brother, your sister, your parents. So why would you try to kind of go down that path? So when I think domestic issues, I, of course, as I'm sure is on everyone's mind, I'm thinking about economy and some more of the tangible reforms that can be done. Of course, with the fiscal cliff, you're talking about entitlement reform, tax reform. These are the things that I think we do have control over, and those are the things that I am always thinking about when it comes to domestic issues. As far as the direction of those, I can only hope that there's some bipartisan effort to make it happen. There's not someone, but all areas have to give a little bit, all areas.
I agree with that. It does have to be a bipartisan effort, and I do think Obama's going in the right direction. He has made strides towards student loan reform, healthcare reform, like you said, with the fiscal cliff, handling Social Security reform as well. So I think if he keeps going in that direction and using bipartisan support, he'll be able to get somewhere. But at the same time, I think at the community level and the neighborhood level, we really need to step up and make our issues known. Make our issues known to our local elected officials and our senators and our congressmen here in our local communities, because they don't know what we need unless we tell them.
This is true.
So, yeah.
I agree with Part is saying that the moral issues are difficult to have like a civil conversation with, let alone have to pass like legislation with. But there's one issue that I feel has been ignored that I feel like needs more attention. That's the issue of gun control.
Ah.
And it's a controversial issue to speak about because there's the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms.
Right.
But like when you look at just recently the Arizona shooting, the president he just got sentenced, and you look at the Colorado shooting at the Batman movie, which has happened recently. I feel like those things aren't things that we can ignore.
Right.
And I know there's the right to bear arms, but there should be a balance as to being not allowing people access to guns who are potentially dangerous with those guns. So I really feel like that's a moral issue that deserves policies to go with them.
So you're suggesting that we change the Second Amendment, the second one? I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah, it's a second.
Yeah, or be clear, because just the right to bear arms, okay, but that doesn't give you the right to harm people, though.
Yes.
And let's make it harder to obtain those weapons so that we can avoid those deaths.
I don't think specifically that the Second Amendment needs to be changed, but the control needs to be fixed a little bit more. I think there are mechanisms to help with the control right now, like background checks and psychological checks, but they have flaws.
But Dave, if you really wanted to buy a gun, you could get one from someone around the corner. Come on.
Or online.
Yeah.
Yes,
A
but
Walmart.
when it comes down to it, how do you control that then?
Yeah.
There's really no mechanism to control that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
you can only do so much in that particular aspect. And people will always want their Second Right Amendment. So it's not something that's going to change anytime soon. The only thing that the government can do is try to fix a little bit more the checks and balances that they can put in place.
I feel like you can still limit the access to it, and that would have to have like a higher policy to do it. Like just the gun manufacturing, make it like a lot more challenging to manufacture guns. But then that's an issue because a lot of money is made from manufacturing guns. So that would have to be like a big policy debate, and I really feel like that deserves a lot of attention.
Wow. How do you guys feel like on this side?
I don't believe in repealing the Second Amendment.
Right.
I don't think that should happen. I agree that there should be some more regulation with gun control, not to the point where it's stifling, but it just needs to be smart regulation. That, okay, if there are obviously inherent issues psychologically, then there might be a reason not to give this person a gun. As you said, it seems like a very easy process to get a gun, and with that type of item that can potentially hurt someone, if not kill them, it seems like much more would need to be done to ensure that it can be sort of bought and sold.
I think there should be stricter regulations on ammunition. I think that we could add some type of excise or luxury tax to ammunition and bullets, just to add a deterrent for people, to obtain guns and ammunition. And then on the other side of it, if they do get caught with an illegal, weapon, maybe have a stricter penalty, stricter punishment. I think that's a good way to address it, but it's kind of a roundabout way to do it, and it's hard to get support for that. So.
There was an issue that Obama agreed with. I don't know if I want to say passed, but when he was running for election, he supported same-sex marriage. How do you all feel about that? Do you think he should have done that? Do you agree with it?
Again, that's a social issue that
Oh, yeah.
that person, again, that's really difficult to challenge. Why is it difficult to challenge? It's because sort of your opinion on social issues comes from how you've grown up, how you've been brought up, and really, unless you're just going to go and turn everyone into a statue or something and say or into a robot, you really can't control how people grow up and what their background is. So it's and then it's very difficult later on to change those thoughts. It's 20 years of growing up with that type of mentality. So when he did that, me personally, I was a fan of it. I have no problem with same-sex marriage. But again, that's just my view. I can't necessarily discredit someone that says, well, I just don't believe in that. Because again, there's a lot that goes into you having that opinion. Being an Indian, having family that is very conservative, but I grew up in a very liberal environment, so they also support it, or at least some members of my family do. And so it ultimately, to me, comes down to how you grow up.
Do you think he did that just to get some extra votes? I wondered about that, the timing of it.
I think that I think that Obama took a risk in making that stance. It was a huge risk, and I think it took a lot of courage. And I admire that courage for him to be the very first president to be pro same-sex marriage. I think that's just awesome. It took a lot of courage. It was very risky, and I think he actually lost a lot of votes because of that decision. A lot of the more conservative Democrats and a lot of the just conservative Democrats that probably would have voted for him but then decided not to. It's a hot button issue for a lot of people.
Oh, yes.
So it took a lot of courage, and then with his administration, Vice President Biden, for him not to let his personal views get in the way of policy decisions, I admire that as well. So even though it's a tough decision, I think it was the right decision.
I think it comes down to personal values. And I do think that by him voicing his opinion is just letting the community know that he supports that particular community. My view on it, on the way he handled it is, you have the government, and you don't want the government telling you what to do.
This is true.
So I think that was a major thing that he wanted to get across, is that you don't want the government telling you what you can and cannot do. If you want to have a partner, that's fine. It's same sex, that's fine. The government is not to mandate to you, well, you can't marry because you're a guy and guy, or a woman and a woman. So I think that's a big step forward. But like you mentioned, it's a very split decision, and to get support, especially through Congress and stuff like that, it would be a very hard thing to do.
So tell me, why do you all think people are so up in the air about Obamacare or his health care plan? I think it's good for you all because you can stay on your parents' insurance longer. So why do you think other people are just so upset and torn up about it?
People don't like change. People don't like to change. And the way that our society is going and the way that our culture is going, we're going to need more healthcare coverage in the future. We're living longer, we're working longer, so it only makes sense to provide that universal healthcare. Now, I don't know too many of the specifics of it, but from what I've heard, a lot of the tension just comes from it being such a huge shift. He's really making a difference. And when you make differences like that over a short period of time, it's scary. But once I learn some more about it, I'll be able to speak more about it.
Well, borrowing some language from what David said, with same-sex marriage, maybe President Obama doesn't want to tell people what to do, how to live. But that same adage is also used on this side, but by the opposing party or by opposing people, and that we shouldn't be told how we give health care or how we get health care. So really, you can use the same adage for both issues. One may be considered a Democrat issue, and one may be considered a Republican issue. I think why it's a big hoopla with healthcare is it's complex. There are a number of factors that roll into that issue, and I personally think that it may not have been expressed as clearly as it could. Now, anything coming from a political system is usually like that. So it's probably difficult just on the first step. But I mean, beyond that, I can't really explain why else it would be so contentious.
When it comes to healthcare reform, I think a lot of the issues that were resolved due to the healthcare reform, I think, are very good. When it comes to, like he said, staying in your parents' insurance until the age of 26. And not only that, but bringing down the cost as well, because not only are more people coming into the system, and that should lower the cost. I think it has to do a lot with fear mongering and things like that, and how the media interprets the law.
You had an opportunity to have lunch with President Obama. What would you say? What would you talk about?
That's a very hard question.
Golly.
There are so many things that you can ask a president. I think what inspires is the way he worked through, from kid and he rose to be the president. I think that is what the conversation, at least with me, would be, as his entire story, from coming from a very poor family and rising, getting educated and everything like that, all the way to being a president.
Well, I would commend him for having the courage to take some tough stances, like committing to passing health care reform, and even like coming out in support of same-sex marriage, which wasn't like a politically correct thing to do, but him having the conviction to do that. And I would say that you just strike me as somebody who genuinely cares about people. So I encourage you to continue to fight for people.
Okay.
I'm not sure what I would say. I would just sit down and just talk to him. Being an African American woman, I just would thank him, for stepping up and being a leader for our community. And I don't know, I would just have a real conversation with them, and ask if he could be my mentor. Write me a recommendation letter or something.
Sort of thinking a few days after the election, sort of how I felt and maybe some of the things I was hearing on the radio. Yes, he's African American, but he also broke the color barrier. So it just, upon election and then again upon re-election, it was, well, that sets me up well too. And so I'm incredibly proud and would of course thank him for that. But just seeing how the climate pre-election or pre-re-election was, it was very nasty. And my conversation would be, hey, how can you make all of this come together?
Right.
You came in 2008 with this, let's work together. Could you possibly come out of your second election or your second term actually doing what you had said back in 2008? Because I think something I heard on the radio was he has either one of two legacies to maybe end with. It's, am I going to be the president that just continues to extend these, maybe liberal policies, as they say, or am I going to be the president that brings everyone together? And I would, of course, prefer the second.
I want to thank you all for joining me today. We had a very good conversation about our president that was just elected a few months ago. And I want to thank each and every one of you for watching my show, Better You, every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. here on Public Access 21.